Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I heard I was competing against cookies. You can't win that fight, right? So I would like to tell you a little bit about our journey at Mercedes-Benz with regards to open source. And there's nothing really specific about the automotive industry. So maybe a few things here and there, but in general, it's maybe also it's applicable for whatever your enterprise is, whatever you're working on. So hopefully you can draw some inspirations. So let me start with a little story. This is about 2016 or so. I was one of the guys running around the office and trying to advocate the usage of inner source and open source. And I ran into a colleague. This was, back in the day when you could still run into people at the office. Not everybody was just working from home. And I said, Marcus, hey, how are you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. What are you guys working on? And he said, oh, we're working on this translation component that does this and that. And I listened, and then after a while I was like, have you talked to your neighbors, like really literally next door office? Because I think they're working on something really similar. And he said, yes, in fact, we have spoken to each other. And yes, we are working on a very similar thing. And so I started to get excited, like, oh, maybe you can work together. And he said, yeah, actually, so if we found out that if we both make our component, or if we just don't make two separate components, but one that's a bit more general, then we could use the same component and save a lot of time and money. I was like, yes. And how's that working out? It's like, well, so we went both and talked to our product owners in the big company that's Mercedes-Benz, product owner here, product owner there, and introduced the idea. And they said, that's a great idea. Yeah, but let's not do it. Why? You thought it was a great idea? Yeah, but we don't really know what it means, inner source, So it's, in all fairness, it wasn't just them being like not understanding, but we at that time lacked the prerequisites. We didn't have, like, basically three things. So one was, we didn't really know what it means to share code across organizations in such a big company. The legal prerequisites weren't there. The intergroup contracts weren't there that would allow that. And other unsolved questions. So I was like, okay, we don't want to be the first ones to try this out, so we're not sure. We didn't have an inner source license. Do we even need one? I don't know. Okay. Second, we didn't have the technical prerequisites because everybody was developing software on platform of their choice, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket Stash, or Team Foundation servers, and whatnot. So that doesn't make exchanging of code impossible, but more difficult. And third, the mindset for sharing wasn't there. It was like, there was no need really, or why should you, okay? So clearly something to work on was like, we can't go on like this, we need to do open source and inner source. And so with me, other people were evangelizing this in a big company. And one of us had a very short connection to the very C-level people, the CEO and the CIO, and introduced the idea to them. And they listened, and they understood, and they said, okay, sounds like something we should do. And so it was taken over into the official IT strategy of Mercedes-Benz, and we were good to go. It was like, yes. So I have compiled a few steps that that I find are crucial to implementing open inner source strategy. So the first one is create an internal awareness. I think today that might be easier than it was 8 years ago because the open source movement has gained a lot of momentum. But it's still the first step you need to do. Create the internal awareness, convince people, especially C-level. And then, so we had that commitment. It was taken into the IT strategy, but then we sat there and we're like, okay, what's next? What do we need to do? So the next thing you need to do, I think, is create an open source program office. Here's just, we heard about this morning actually already in a couple of talks. I think this actually kind of sums it up quite nicely. Quotes by a guy named John Mark Walker. And there are still companies that are in denial that say, no, we don't do open source. But I think you're actually wrong. Everybody's nowadays engaged in open source one way or another. Even if you don't use it in your own development, remember, buying third-party software probably means you're using open source, right? So, and if a centralized open source program office is, yeah, it's the realization of that reality and the best way to yield the most benefits from open source participation. So what does an open source program office do? Here are some of the typical tasks. Instead of having somebody in a company here doing open source and somebody there, and they're not talking to each other, create a corporate open source strategy, you know, and this is where it comes together. And you're doing open source in a concerted way, and not just somebody does something somewhere, okay? You need to define policies and rules for that purpose, as well as processes. And then it's usually good to have some tool recommendations for license scanning, for example, and so forth. You want to then tell your engineers, and everybody actually, not just the engineers, so you need some trainings, and then community management is important. You want to publicize stuff yourself, and membership in foundations and external visibility. And I will, in the remainder of my talk, dive into these in a bit more detail. Okay, so here's an example of our OSPO at Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation. To be exact, we're a 100% IT subsidiary of the big company, but at the big company, we're very, we only do business together, so it's quite similar. But so the structure here is next to some organizational staff. I think you need these three, and may differ for your company, but I think this kind of, I would say, the basics. So governance. You're doing this with the open source, there are a lot of license questions involved, so you really need governance to tell you what exactly do these licenses mean, how do they work together, and so forth, right? Community management, a lot of times overlooked. It's actually a few years ago I said, I need community managers in my OSPO. It's like, okay, go ahead. And now everyone's like, I need community managers. In my company, they're taking my community managers away. Engineers are usually really good at writing code, but they're not usually good at community management. I mean, sometimes yes, but in general, they think if I write good software, people will automatically find out about it and use it, right? And that's just not the case. So you need people specializing in that. And this is community management. And then overall, of course, it's an IT topic, so you need technical staff. All right. One concept that is working for us is also the FOSS coordinators. So we have in each business unit or business stream, we have 1 or 2 FOSS coordinators, and they connect with us, with the OSPO, very closely. And so I ask them, so what's going on in your business unit? What do you need with regards to FOSS? And then at the same time, I tell them, these are the news from the OSPO. Please go and spread the news in your business unit. Okay, so these are multipliers, and I think that's really important. So we try to align with them very closely. Because also, we can't, there are thousands of people at Mercedes, we can't, answer all the questions. But, so we train them so they can answer the questions. And if they don't know the answer, then they can come to us. Okay, so embrace FOSS. We have an OSPO. Now we said we want to embrace FOSS. What does that even mean, embrace FOSS? So, usually there are 3 aspects to FOSS, and if you include inner source as well, although that's obviously not free and open source, but sometimes thrown into the same bucket. 3 aspects. The first one is use. So use software in your own software development, use open source. That's the easy part, right? I mean, kind of. It's kind of a no-brainer. Duh, there's good stuff that you get for free, so use it. Why should I develop solutions myself for which there already is a fine, perfectly working solution that's tested by thousands of people? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Even if you had all the time in the world to develop this software yourself, which you don't, you still wouldn't have all the money in the world to do it, let alone the manpower, okay? So that's, today, you can't develop software anymore without open source. Use. The difficult part here, of course, is the license stuff. Then the next thing is you want to contribute back to open source projects like bug fix or even documentation, anything really. And the third one is publish your own stuff as open source. And embracing means all of this and more. We'll get to the and more part. Now, one thing about use, I guess I can go over this quickly because Claire had similar slides this morning. These are the latest numbers though from the 2024 report from Synopsys. So they found that 96%, these are the guys that bring you Black Duck, right, Synopsys. 96% of the code bases they looked at contained open source code, and 77% in fact was made up of open source. 77%, that's wow. So only 23% of the code is what you develop yourself. And they divide it down into several sectors of industry. We're obviously in this one here, automotive, and they found in 100% of the code bases there is open source, and 69% was made up of open source. So here's the proof. Can't develop software without open source anymore. Now, using, as I said, that's kind of the no-brainer. But why should a company invest time and money to contribute something back? Why does that make sense from an economic point of view? So there's a study by Frank Nagel from the Harvard Business School, and he found out in a really nice, thorough study that companies who contribute back actively benefit twice as much, monetarily speaking, from open source than companies who only use open source and don't contribute back. And so this is a really nice argument if you want to tell your senior executives why it's worth your time. Now, why is it worth your time? Not just because that guy says so, but why is it that they benefit twice as much? The thing is, when you contribute back, you engage with the open source community, with some of the brightest engineers out there, and you go through a feedback process. You create a pull request, and somebody will comment on it and say, that's a good way of doing this, but may I suggest you try this? Or could you maybe alter it a little bit to do this? And then you kind of have this exchange back and forth. And this is like an internal training program. And it's not a one-time effect only. It keeps on giving, and your engineers get smarter and smarter. And I've talked to a lot of engineers who say, yes, it's really true. I learned so much from an open source contribution that I made because of this. So I think this is a really strong, compelling argument. Please contribute back as well. And so we have, this is a couple years old. We created a little video where we wanted to tell our senior managers why they should invest the time to embrace FOSS. So what I just said is one reason, but there are a few more reasons. The video is about 2.5 minutes long, and I'm going to play it for you. So sit back and wait, the video is here. Okay.
So why should you embrace FOSS in your team? Well, for one, she really likes FOSS.
Oh, I should have said that this is the CIO of Mercedes-Benz. Her name is Katrin Lehmann. And she's a really great advocate of open source. And at every talk she gives, she mentions, and open source, yeah? And so she really likes FOSS. You can do FOSS to please her, but, so there's more to it.
FOSS in your team. Well, for one, she really likes FOSS, so you can make her happy. But that shouldn't be the real reason behind it. Let me give you some pointers. Innovation nowadays happens to a large degree in the FOSS domain. Therefore, doing FOSS can speed up our access to innovative technologies to be at the forefront where automotive goes digital. Second, with FOSS, we are achieving a much higher efficiency in software development. It fosters reuse, and it's cheaper and easier on your engineer. You save yourself time and money, and you can go faster and faster. And this will give us the freedom to focus even more on our USPs. Also, it's in your own best interest. By being active in FOSS, and not only use it, you can steer open source projects in the direction you need them. Contributions are the currency of open source. It is how you provide influence to the project your business depends on. And what's even more, our FOSS endeavors help us to attract new talent. We need software engineers. That's a fact. And they are attracted to open source like a moth to a flame. Trust me on this. Plus, participating in open source is like a continuous internal training program for the engineers that we already have, as has been proven in the Harvard study. Our engineers will learn and get better and better. And this isn't a one-time effect only, which merely occurs at the beginning. The advantages of the learning process will keep going on, over and over and over again. Well, I can think of at least 10 more good reasons why you should be active in FOSS. Bottom line is, for software development, FOSS is like the air you breathe. You need it, and that's all there is to it. So please, open up as much as you can, because it makes us all so much better.
So, with FOSS you can do magic. I was told that sometimes when you see the video for the first time, you can't really pay attention after a while. So here are, oops, wait, all right. So here are all the points that I said. I'm not going to go over them again now, but basically this is the summary. So here is again two statements, recent statements, very powerful. Here's Katrin Lehmann again, our CIO. She says a healthy open source culture is one of the smartest entrepreneurial investments in the future and social responsibility at the same time. She said in an interview with the CIO magazine. And then here is our chief software engineer from the R&D department, and he said, of course, open source is not a one-way street. For every piece of code we use, we have a responsibility to contribute something as well. And more recently, in November, our CEO, Ola Kelenius, that's him signing the document over here, he signed a letter of intent within the strategy dialogue automotive industry. This is the state of Baden-Württemberg. That's a southwestern state in Germany, where Mercedes is based, for example, and other companies. This is the minister-president of the state, and so they got together and signed a document that says, strengthening open source development in our state and helping the small and medium enterprises. The big companies will try to help the small ones because a lot of times they don't know what they should do with open source. But we rely on them as well because a lot of them are our suppliers. Okay, so it was also signed by Bosch and by Porsche. And here this is the Chamber of Commerce and Industry and University of Karlsruhe. And so this is a great statement. I show this slide in the company. It's like, look, Ola Kelenius, he signed this. Very important. So this is really cool. What we also did, we wrote a FOSS manifesto, like a colleague and myself, we wrote this. And what it is a set of guidelines which outline the importance of open source for the company. And it's a public commitment. We say yes to open source. So before, years and years ago, it was our engineers would say, are we allowed to do open source? And that's why we created this. And this manifesto doesn't say only you're allowed to. No, we actually actively ask you to please be active in open source. So it's, try to facilitate the cultural change, which is what, the third thing I mentioned that was hindering us. So there's a preamble. I'm going to skip this for now, but it basically has two main parts, the company principles and the employee principles. And so the company principles here, this says we as Mercedes-Benz will support our employees to use, contribute to, and create open and inner source projects. And this is working time because a lot of, before engineers would work on open source in their free time, so they have the bug fix ready the next day for their work. That's not how it should be, right? You're doing this for your job, then it's job, it's work time. And there are also working laws in Germany, right? Or anywhere. So here you have the time, and we please, so learn with open source, maybe attend a conference, yeah, which is a great place for learning. And we will also promote open source communities. And so that's company point of view. Here's the employee's point of view. Please, if you're an engineer, before you write your own code, go and look if there's something in open source or if there's something in inner source. And only then consider make or buy. And not, before it was make or buy. Now it's like open source, inner source, then talk about make or buy. Yeah. Please be active in inner source, please be active in open source. And this here is a kind of a mini code of conduct, Remember, how you behave out there will reflect back on the company, so please be nice. Don't be evil. You can find the FOSS manifesto on our open source landing page right here. We put it under a very unrestricted license, Creative Commons 1.0. And if you think this is something nice to have for your company as well, you can just take that, alter it in any way, take parts, change it. You don't have to attribute it to us. Okay, and several companies have already done this. So you see here, there's the Continental Automotive Company, Siemens. I suppose everybody knows Siemens. Here's Porsche. Inditex is one of the largest textile companies in Europe, based in Spain. Deutsche Bahn is the German rail company. I was going to make a bad joke about the German railroad company, but I will not. I don't think it would have arrived, the joke. So here, Cariad is a Volkswagen company, ETAS is a Bosch company, and SAP is a obviously. These were funny. They're like, Wolfgang, we are a software company. You guys are automotive, and you showed us the way in open source. I mean, they've been active in open source a long time, don't get me wrong, but they say, we really want this manifesto as well, and so they came out with it last year. And so it's really cool. And I hear another, like I've talked to several other companies who have this in the making, so I think this is really cool. So, train your employees. I don't even know how much time I have left, actually. Does anybody? Okay. Thanks. Good. Because we started late, so I'm all. Train your employees. We created a set of trainings. We called it the FOSS and Inner Source Driver's License. And awareness is like just the mindset. That's for everyone. And then depending on, whether you engage in use, contribution, create, or inner source, you have to do these trainings. They're actually quite nice, these trainings. I mean, they take like an hour or two each. And we even won like an e-learning award for them. Yes. Sometimes financial people will say, yeah, okay, but what if we invest so much money in training our employees and then they leave the company? Like, yeah, that's not desirable, but the alternative is you don't train them and they stay. Okay, so I think it's better to train them. So foundations and sponsorships, we're members of several foundations, and I think open source foundations are doing a great job in open source. We're members of the Eclipse Foundation, the Software Defined Vehicle Working Group, which is automotive centered, but there are more non-automotive companies than automotive. Recently joined the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group as strategic members, also members of Linux Foundation, Cloud Native, and Green Software Foundation, and several more, but these are the main open source foundations. I think these are really good. Sponsorings, it's giving back. You can give back to open source by contributions, but you can also, another way is to give back through your employees that dedicate their time. And another way is by financial sponsorships. And the economic times are tough in the automotive industry, I guess you've heard. But I mean, we were fine, but we need to save money, of course. But open source sponsors, we're still keeping this up, and I think and I love it. And so we pick projects, we ask our community, which are your favorite projects, which do you use a lot? And then we, through GitHub sponsors, give them money. Like, we allocate certain amounts of money per month or one-time payments. And this is really nice. I get great feedback from the projects we sponsor. And it's not just, you give them free money. Yeah, people are going to be happy about that. But it's more, they say, the pat on the shoulder, Mercedes is using my project. This really gave me a push to carry on. And Another guy said, you know, I'm just doing this as a side job, and I can concentrate more on open source work now, and like all various ways, but it's really cool. I'm very happy that we can still do this. All right, and lastly, have fun. I think it's in Germany we're very serious people usually, right? Yeah, no. But it's work and fun. One is work and the other one is fun, but I think, combine the two, that's the best. So here, this is our picture from our first Mercedes-Benz FOSS convention that we had 3 years ago, or 2.5, with 80 people. And then the second time we invited 250 people, and it was great. It was super nice, yeah. So the first one was in the stadium, the football stadium in Stuttgart. I mean, not here, but they have conference rooms as well. And the second one was in the Mercedes-Benz Museum, which is a really nice location. In case you're ever in Stuttgart, go there. It's actually really cool. And here we did a GitHub video. We did a video with GitHub. If you go on YouTube and you search Mercedes-Benz and GitHub, you can see the video. It's like 5 minutes, and it was so much fun to make the video. And the video itself, I think, is fun too. Okay, so it's a few minutes. Watch it. And that's me giving this was, at the height of COVID. And I'd gotten sick of watching online conferences and just talking to nobody really, and I love an audience, yeah. And so one day I went to this conference all virtually, and I dressed up as a pirate, and I gave a talk as a pirate. And I didn't tell my communications department before that I was going to do this, because they would have never. Mercedes is a serious brand, You don't, yeah, okay. But anyway, it was so much fun. I talked like a pirate too, and I had the props. I had like a gold nuggets and a bottle of rum and what. It was really funny. It's still the most viewed talk from that conference, so it was good. So that's it. Thanks very much. May there always be wind in your hair.